Good morning to all, and welcome to our annual intellectual upgrade. We are indeed privileged again to have Roger Martin here. And this is the third time that Roger came back to Australia to work with us on the concept of cascade of choices and the choices we're making and the strategic choices. And every year we have taken it to a new level. The fundamental premise of the business plan for this year has been to re-establish the growth momentum. If you look at the numbers, and Keith may have spoken to you at partner meetings about it, you will see that the growth momentum is starting to come back, but it's very slow. And what we need to do is, as a business, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our young people to create a business with momentum. And that momentum is going to be dependent on the choices we make. Choices on acquisitions, but more importantly, choices on where we play and how we compete. And that has been the essence of the discussions that we had with Roger over the last few years. What we have decided to do this year is, rather than just focusing on the mainstream drivers of the business, which happens to be our service lines, we're looking at the lateral drivers more this year. So for yesterday and today, Roger has spent some time and will spend some time with the industry programs and challenging the industry leaders on their choices. Now, industries are very important in the where to play, but also in the configuration of the how to win. That's where the knowledge is. That's where, if you go back to the Roger model, that's where we have to turn mysteries into heuristics. And he's challenging us on that. And that challenge is not easy, as I'm sure that some of the industry leaders will tell you. But having said that, we also have other elements that cuts across the business. Another element is the hedges, or as we now call them, momentum bets, which are choices that came out of the work that we've done for the planning, but we've identified 18 of those, 10 of which, or 12 of which are actually in production as we speak. So Roger has spent some time with those owners, and Roger's also spent some time, and this is the first time that we've done it, spent some time with our account directors and managers. Service lines identified the star account directors and star managers. And that we believe is good, because these people don't often come together as groups, but they are the next-gen leaders. As we have next-gen leaders in this room, at a corporate level, they are our next-generation partners. And we wanted to give them some insight to that as well. So all of that is just saying that we as partners need to lift the level of our thinking continuously. And that's what renewal is all about, is to continuously grow and improve, and to continuously challenging ourselves. And it's in that sense that we've asked Roger again to spend time with the partners here in Sydney, and we are videotaping the session for further use throughout the country. And then tomorrow we will also do the same in Melbourne, where we will spend some time with the partners there. And then to share that amongst all of our partners to give us the ability to be better at the choices that we make. What we've asked Roger to do today is to do what Roger wants to do. I can't tell Roger what to do. You don't bring a smart guy out and then tell him what to do. However, what Roger will share with us is just some observations on the progress that we've made over the time, some observations on the discussions he's having at this stage, and then some of the novel thinking. Since he stepped down as the Dean of the Rotman Business School, and he's now the principal of the Martin Prosperity Institute, and also the Premier Chair for Productivity and Competitiveness at the Rotman School of Management, he had more time to think about some of the bigger problems and some of the fundamental problems inherent in the way we plan, the way we think, and also the way we develop strategy and execute strategy. And I'm sure you're going to talk about the concepts there as well. So what we ask him to do is to share a general observation, but then also to talk to us about the new developments and where are the new traps that he sees in terms of doing what we're trying to do. So Roger, without further ado, welcome and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction, and it's great to be back. I must say, there's a real plus and a minus of sort of having the life that I've led, which is sort of, I've mainly been a consultant. I was a dean for a while, but I still consulted on the side, and you're sort of a vagabond. You go around the world from place to place, and it's kind of fun and it's exciting to see new and interesting situations. But I do find it really kind of very warm for me to come back to the same company a number of times, because I get to know you, and it's just lots of fun. So thank you for the warm welcome. Thanks for the degree to which I feel embraced in this organization. I thought this morning I would kind of focus a little bit on kind of tradecraft. I mean, what I've talked about previously are the strategy concepts, but in behind them, as you're now working through cascades in your service lines and geographies and industries, you'll note it isn't an algorithm, right? It is a heuristic. Here are the choices you need to make, and there's a lot of kind of tradecraft that goes into it. So I just thought I'd sort of share some of the things that I've learned about that, try and give examples of them, and then talk a little bit about what Harat said. What I've observed are a bunch of traps that people tend to fall into on strategy, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm game to talk about anything else that any of you want to talk about. I'm also game, as always, to be interrupted at any point. I have a life where I speechify all the time, but I'm not nuts about speechifying. I like having discussions more than giving speeches. So stop me at any point. So let me just start into reminding us about the fundamental of strategy, right? Strategy is choice. Now, I would say that most of the companies that I work with, including yours, embrace the notion of choice. But there is something about choices that I find being articulated that are unhelpful. And the one thing that I would say is a helpful little test for if you've actually made a choice is if you can say the opposite and it's not stupid, right? So there are many companies that say, we've made a choice to be close to our customers. So for that to really be a choice, you have to be able to say, okay, this other company has made a choice to be far, far away from customers. And then the question is, can somebody make the opposite choice and actually make money doing that? And so being distant from your customers, not talking to your customers, being the opposite of your choice, I don't think there's many companies that ever make a buck on that. And so that choice, the opposite, is patently stupid. So the only choice you've made is to be non-stupid, right? So the tradecraft here is every time you write down a choice of any sort, like I've talked about all sorts of choices that you have to make, anytime you write down a choice, just do the little mental check to say, okay, what's the opposite of this choice, and is it just stupid on its face, right? In which case you say that isn't a choice. You don't get any credit for that. So I don't give anybody credit for saying that they're going to actually hang out with their customers. I just say, okay, that's non-stupid, good, but now tell me what you're really going to do that's useful. But if it's not totally obvious that the opposite is just plain stupid, then what you need to ask yourself to know whether it's a real choice and sort of a powerful choice, a choice that will help you, is for you to ask the question, has anybody else made that choice, right? The opposite choice of what we've made, and do they make a buck on it, right? So if you just think about the kind of the global mutual fund industry, there are a couple of really gigantic, prominent companies, right? Vanguard and Fidelity. And they both have got now over $2 trillion of assets under management. And it's a great example of kind of real choices, right? So Vanguard, John Bogle, is a friend of mine, a crusty old man. Has anybody ever seen John Bogle give a talk? If you haven't, you should. He's this crusty old, now 90-year-old fellow who has said for his entire career, active management is a dumb idea. It doesn't pay off, and therefore Vanguard will never offer active management. All they offer are index funds, lots and lots of index funds at the lowest possible cost. So they've made a choice to say active management of funds is a stupid idea, and we're not going to do that. That's our choice. How do we know it's a good choice? In part because there's this gigantic company, Fidelity, that says active management is what you need. You need portfolio managers to figure out exactly what stocks to buy and put together that portfolio of mutual funds for you that's customized to you, and you'll beat the market. And they both have $2 trillion of assets under management, so they're both making real choices. because somebody's actually doing the opposite of what they say. And one of the things, just from a societal standpoint, choices are good. Right? Making real choices is good, because what do you have is a situation that's resultant. Different kinds of customers can have different kinds of products, and so you get a diversity of offerings. They're both making money, and the customers are being served well. So when you think about strategy, and when you think about choice, if I've convinced you that it's about choices, then go that extra step as you're thinking about your choices and ask the question, what's the opposite? Is anybody doing it? Is anybody making money at the opposite? And if they are, it's a really good sign. Right? If nobody is, then your choice is probably not powerful. And one of the things I'd say also is it's a really good sign, and sometimes I find that companies are incredibly jealous of other people's choice and the fact that they make money with those choices. Oh, we have to go after that business because they're making money at it. That's almost always a bad idea, right? Like, there aren't many businesses where you get to have a monopoly for a long period of time. And I would argue one of the most dangerous things for the longevity of a company is to have a monopoly. Most monopolies, when they go away, the monopolist gets crushed because they're used to being a monopoly. So even though it may feel convenient in the short term to have a monopoly, it is not. It is better to have a competitor who has figured out how to win in a place that's near you but not overlapping with you and serve a bunch of customers. Don't be jealous of that. Focus on winning where you want to win. And then of course, you've been making a real choice. Okay? So the other thing, so that's an aspect about choices in general. Then there's the notion that there are these 5 choices, right? And here I just want to emphasize that so much of strategy, I find, just an overwhelming amount of strategy never really addresses or answers these choices. And it's wonderful to see here all the industry groups and service lines and the like creating their cascades and starting to think about that set of choices. And I think there's good progress being made. I have a few kind of thoughts on it though from what I've seen. And the first one has to do with winning aspiration. Right? And lots of people ask me, why are you so obsessive about winning? Why is winning so important? And the reason why it's so important, why I encourage and I see some of the cascades as playing as opposed to winning. And winning is just so important, I find, and it's just sort of an empirical point, not necessarily a theoretical point, an empirical point, is that investments made in playing, if I look back over 33 years of hanging around companies and watching their strategies and watching them make initiatives, what I'd say is a consistent picture is investments made to play, to catch up, to be a participant, almost always disappoint. I can't tell you how many business plans I've seen. We're going to invest this $200 million to close the gap with the leader in our industry, and that is going to make us that $200 million is going to earn us a 15% kind of return on the investment, or 12% or 10%, or whatever it is. And you look at it ex post, and it's all accomplished. The gap has been closed, but the financial results tend to be worse than in whatever analysis was done. It just seems to be kind of a fact of life. And why is it a fact of life? Is if you're not trying to win, right, it means that when you do whatever you're doing, when you've made those choices, you're left with somebody who's either a cost leader that you're competing against and who's winning, or a differentiator, right? And if it's a cost leader, right, and you just got sort of average costs and no real differentiation, but you're close to them, what can they do? whenever they feel like getting a little bit extra share, they'll take prices down farther than you can take prices down and take your share away. Right? You have no protection against a marauding cost leader. And similarly, a differentiator, right? If they're producing more value than you and earning a higher margin by being able to charge higher prices with stable share, if they ever want more share, what do? Just charge less of a price premium, close the price gap, and if you don't have advantage, they just grab your share. So the only safety, I mean, it is an unsafe world in general, right? The business world is unsafe. Everybody here in the room knows that. It's unstable, and there's always competitive threats in all businesses. But the only modicum of safety you have is from winning. It's from having a superior value equation to competitors. Then you can do the marauding when you feel like it, and they can't defend themselves. And that's why having a winning strategy is so very important, and why it's transformational when you go from playing to winning. And I'll tell just a little, just for the fun of it, because it's been so much fun story about this. So if you look back to 2004-05 and ask what was the history of tennis in Canada? Were we winning? The answer was not really. If by kind of winning you meant having a men's player in the top 50 in the last 15 years, the answer was no, we didn't have that. If it means being in the Davis Cup World Group on a regular basis, well, 1993 was the last time we'd done that. Of having a top woman or a woman in the top 50, well, it was about 12 years since we'd had that Fed Cup. We'd never been in the World Group in the Fed Cup. Okay, so I'd call that kind of not winning, right? And so there was a group of 3 crazy people who 9.5 years ago said, this is not good enough. Why don't we aspire to win? Why don't we aspire to be a leading tennis nation? Why don't we aspire to have Grand Slam champions? Why don't we aspire to consistently be in the World Group and Fed Cup and Davis Cup and consistently have top 50 men's and women's singles players? You'd say, wow, okay, so that all sounds good, but you haven't never done any of those other things, and you're kind of like going to do all of those things, right? Well, if you look at it now, right, it's taken a few years, but there are now sort of 8 exemplary young men and women players who are seated in the Grand Slams, 4 men and 4 women. Milos Raonic, Jerzy Janowicz, a Pole, Grigor Dimitrov, a Bulgarian, and Vasek Pospisil, a Canadian. And on the women's side, 2 Americans, Sloane Stephens and Madison Keys, Czech, Elena Svitolina, and a Canadian, Eugenie Bouchard. We have 3 of the 8 players that are young and in the top 32 on the men's or women's side. Every single country in the world would trade their young players for ours at this point in time. Never happened before. We made it to the Davis Cup semifinals last year. We're now a consistent World Group player. We just made the World Group for the first time, and the Fed Cup side. And even though we've got those 3 top young players, the world has not yet experienced the best player in Canada, a woman named Françoise Obanda, who looks like Venus Williams, 6'1", 16 years old, and has a great chance to be a Grand Slam champion. So you'd say, and that's 9.5 years later. How do you do that? Well, it starts with saying, we're going to win. We're not just going to play. We're not going to field Davis Cup teams. We're not going to field Fed Cup teams. We're going to win, which then makes it necessary to have different where to play, how to win choices than your competitors, right? So what we do is we say, you know what? It's turning out that you got to start earlier in tennis to have a chance, unless you're playing competitive tennis with great coaching as a 9 or 10-year-old, you have no chance to be a Grand Slam champion. But it is interesting how in the rest of the world, the juniors have kind of juniory kind of coaches, and the really, really great world-class coaches coach kind of players when they're 16, 18, and onward. Why don't we do the following? Why don't we put our absolutely best resources in the world against under 14? So we hire a guy who, does there any tennis fans here? Bob Brett, does that name ring a bell? So he's probably Harry Hopman, the greatest tennis coach that's ever lived, Australian coach who coached all your great players. His protege is Bob Brett, one of the 3 best coaches in the world. We hire him and say, you're not going to work with champions, you're going to work with kiddies. And he was really excited about this. And man, did it weird people out when he showed up with 11-year-old kids at little ITF tournaments, and they're like, why are you coaching an 11-year-old? Well, because that's what's going to produce great players. We hired the number 2 out of the French Federation to run our 14 and over program. We quadrupled the amount of money that we were going to put into tennis high performance tennis by hiring a real business guy to run our tournaments and make 4 times as much as we were making before. We did things completely differently than we did before, and differently than other people in the tennis world. Other people in the tennis world are all asking the question, how on earth is one little country that had no tennis tradition to speak of producing the best players in the world? It's by choosing a different where to play and a different how to win that's based on a winning aspiration from the start. So I think any organization can do it. I use that as an example because it is not ex post rationalization. This was the strategy that Jack Graham, myself, and Tony Ames formulated in 2004, 2003-04, and we've been sticking religiously to it. So you got to have the winning aspiration. If you don't have a winning aspiration, you're not going to do any of those other things. So don't fool yourself about what winning is, and don't play. And I know it's daunting. I know that this is really daunting when you're losing, right? And I would say it was daunting, when you took over Guillaume and Deloitte was trailing the pack dramatically. But having a goal to win makes a difference. It sometimes takes a while. In this case, it took kind of 7 years or so of hard slogging with very little to show for it before we'd never won a junior Grand Slam singles championship before. And 2 years ago, we won 3 in 1 year. And that was like 7 years after we started. So often these things take a while to show real results, but they will if you stick to a strategy for winning and make choices that are distinctive. Where to play? I mean, my observation on where to play is this is the area where I think, in some sense, there's just such an opportunity for more creative thinking. Here again, where to play, an absolute key is to not play everywhere. The wider an array of space, whether it's every kind of customer, every geography, every product line, every price point, a wide choice of where to play is prima facie evidence of lack of confidence. You might think it's the opposite. We can play everywhere. No, it's not. It's because we have no confidence in dominating anything. We're going to try and play in every field, and if we cast a big enough drift net, some fish will actually show up in it, and we will be able to survive. That is what a choiceless where to play is. So one of the things I would really encourage Deloitte Australia across all of its businesses, if all of its businesses, literally every one that I've seen to date, narrowed its where to play Deloitte Australia would be better off. Now, that would mean that some businesses would be too narrow, right? I'm just saying I'd be willing to make the rule that every single one has to narrow it to where to play, because the benefits across the business would outweigh the costs by an order of magnitude. We're just trying to play in too many places. And what I think it's a reflection of, to be honest, is and I've talked about this yesterday with various of the groups, is sort of, it's indicative of what I think of as a sort of pre-competitive market, the vestiges of a pre-competitive market. So in sort of pre-competitive markets, I've consulted a lot in professional service firms, and I've consulted, I did consulting 25 years ago, yeah. Man, I'm getting old, with one of the leading law firms in Canada. And it was just interesting to see how they thought about competition, which is, right, the way they thought about sort of competition was they fielded a bunch of partners, and these partners had individual kind of relationships with companies, and those companies trusted that partner and gave the firm, this Tory Deloitte Bennington, a bunch of business. And that's a pre-competitive market, right? Which is that there was sort of a crazy quilt of clients that were just a result of individual kind of relationships. But the business, I kept saying, this business is changing, and it has changed a lot. When it goes from sort of pre-competitive, where it's highly fragmented and then anybody can get a little bit of business here, there, or the other way, to competitive. Well, when it gets competitive, you need to bring winning assets to bear. You need to be able to be awesome and have awesome depth at demutualization or kind of mergers in the international kind of mining business, right? And then you start winning business, not based solely on a partner relationship, but real capabilities, right? And you can't build real capabilities everywhere, right? And so I would argue that the businesses that Deloitte is in are in the middle of a transition from pre-competitive to highly competitive. Some are farther along than others, I would suspect, if you analyze the portfolio. But the movement, for sure, I have no doubt, is that the movement is towards needing to have more coherent competitive advantage that is a firm asset, right? Not simply a partner asset, right? In professional service firms, in the pre-competitive mode, partners and individual skills that reside within the partner themselves is the absolute dominant asset. In the competitive phase of professional service firm industries, it's a combination. The partners are still really, really important, and their ability to service the client in a wonderful way is really important, but they need to be backed by capabilities that aren't just kind of random and aren't just put together on a Friday afternoon. They're invested in, and there's a learning curve to them, and you get better by doing more of the same thing, getting down the learning curve, getting more expert all along. And so it's almost like a plea, which is think about the future, not the past. In the pre-competitive world, anything goes. If there's some company out there that you've heard of, you can go sell them, and if you get a good relationship with them, you'll do business there. So it doesn't matter what segment it is, what kind of company it is, what you're doing for them, it's just fine. I have zero doubt that world is going away. And as it goes away, making very coherent choices about where to play is going to become ever more important. And it will become deadly not to make where to play choices. And broad where to plays are going to get killed, in my view. And broad boilerplates are not great for either the customers or the companies, right? The last thing you want for an industry is to have all the competitors overlapped with with each other competitor everywhere. Antitrust economists like that because they have a doctrine that says that'll keep the prices down for customers and that's a good thing. Antitrust economists don't understand anything about innovation, and so what they don't realize is that it'll be like the US airline industry, where prices indeed have been kept down. And I don't know if you guys have been flying in the United States lately, but every year the experience for customers is worse and worse and worse and worse, and there is no end to the worsening of that situation. Because the companies are making no money, and so all they can do is charge you for more things. Like I'm just waiting for when they'll say, you know, here's a good idea. Here's a way to make more money. Let's charge for a per bag charge for people in first class too. You know, we charge for not people in coach. Why don't we do that? That's a free way to make some more money. And why do we have to actually feed them in first class? I mean, seriously, can't they bring their own sandwich on? Anyway, I digress. As you can tell, I'm bitter. I fly in the United States all the friggin' time, and it is horrible. Why? It's because all the companies are indistinguishable from one another, except Southwest. The rest keep merging with each other as if they're going to get competitive advantage. But after they're done merging, United looks exactly like American, which looks exactly like Delta, which looks exactly like Continental. And customers take it in the teeth, shareholders take it in the teeth, and it's miserable. That's all a function of no intelligence whatsoever on where to play. None, zero, nada. And I understand why. I was on a board with one of the most legendary, for 10 years, one of the most legendary figures in the US airline industry. He shall remain nameless. And he would always complain about his industry. He would say, you know, there's just so much price competitiveness and so much, price cutting and irrational behavior, and it's just terrible. And he was treating it all like it was exogenous, like somebody was doing that to them. And I'm like, Bob, you've been the CEO for one of these companies for 20 years. You're talking about you. You're talking about you. And interesting enough, he had absolutely no sense of strategy whatsoever. It was really interesting. No sense of strategy whatsoever. And so it was an object lesson in, if you don't have a sense of strategy, you will make bad where-to-play decisions, and bad things will happen to you and your industry, but that will not prevent you from blaming it entirely on outside random events that had nothing to do with you. So where-to-play, as I look through these cascades, my reaction is good start, but I would say narrow. Figure out where you're going to stand and fight, and figure out where you're going to stand and fight. That you will be the best. That nobody will be able to touch you. And I swear you will be happier, even though it feels dangerous. It feels like, oh my God, there's revenues over there we could be chasing after. Those are empty calories. Right? Like if you ask any analyst, like you should get an analyst to come in and talk to a group like this, intelligent ones. There's a bunch of them that aren't worth talking to, but there are some actually who are intelligent about this, and just ask them how they value companies. And I can tell you that they ascribe almost all the value in companies to often and only little pieces of companies, right? Right? When they'll say, well, Mondelez or Kraft, Kraft Foods, here's what Kraft dinner is worth, and here's what these three products are worth, and everything else is just a wash, right? And they're literally often talking about 20 or 30% of the entire company is where all the value is. And what's unique about those pieces of the company is that those pieces have a very clear where to play, a very clear how to win, and are worth all the value. And so stay away from empty calories by narrowing your where to plays. That also helps the how to win. And one of the things I need to reinforce over and over again is, and maybe this is my fault, I don't know, it probably is, but I draw this, like I drew this, it's my fault. I drew this the way I've drawn it, which is in order. And maybe it's because I'm sort of a little bit anal, I say there is an actual order to it. Like I could have just randomly put these on a piece of paper, right? But I said, no, there is a kind of an order. You have to kind of think about this before this, before this, before this. But no matter how many times I say, but you have to keep circling back and keeping them loose, not tighten up until you've made decisions on the other ones. You know, you have to be empirical. You have to then watch what happens when you say those things. And when I say those things, in a lot of situations, it doesn't happen. People like to lock and load on the earlier ones before going to the later ones. And one of the classic places to lock on is where to play. And I can't tell you how many, and this is a tradecraft thing, like I can't tell you how many companies that I've worked with where they'll come to me and say, we've done this playing to win thing, and here's where we are. We did a whole bunch of good work on winning aspirations. We did a whole bunch of work on where to play, and now we're stuck on how to win. We're stuck, and can you help us? And we want you to focus on entirely on how to win. Can you come and do a seminar with us where you're going to work through how to win with us? Because we're done with where to play already, Roger. And I always have to say the same thing, which is that will be relatively useless. I mean, I can do it, I guess, but if you actually want something productive to happen, we'll have to revisit where to play, because you can't make a great how to win decision without being able to revisit where to play and toggle back and forth between where to play and how to win. Where to play and how to win are the heart of strategy. Right? Those decisions are absolutely at the heart of strategy. And if you lock and load on the where, right, you're not going to get an optimal combination of where to play and how to win. It's pretty much as simple as that. If you just think of optimization, right, theory, that if you allow two variables to vary at the same time, you have a chance of finding the global peak, right? If you insist on locking and loading on one and then seeing and letting the other vary, you'll get a peak, but it's very little chance of it being the global peak. It'll be what they call an optimization, a local peak, right? So don't just try as hard as you can not to say, I'm done with where to play, now I'm on to how to win. Think rather in terms of pairs. You brainstorm pairs of where to play, how to win. We could have this where to play, which would go with this how to win. We could have this other where to play that would go with this how to win, and this other where to play that goes with this how to win. Think about it in pairs, not we have our where to play, now let's figure out the how to win. And that will give you a better chance at a better win. And anytime you're frustrated, and this is the tradecraft, anytime you find yourself frustrated with where to play, with how to win, I can't find a how to win, I can't find a how to win. The first thing that should occur to you is, then probably our where to play isn't as good as it could be. If we shrank that to a narrower where to play, might we be able to win? If we shifted from this where to play to a different where to play, would we find a place to win? That's the secret to getting past that conundrum, or that roadblock, which I find that many clients that I work with have. Okay. The other thing I'd just say about how to win is, here's where it's so important not to fool yourself. Right? It's daunting. When you're losing in a business, it's daunting to say, I have to keep on working until I find a way where we'll actually win. But you might as well not do strategy if you're not going to go for that. And just don't fool yourself on that. And again, there are only two ways to win. Right? You either create more value for the user than everybody else in the market, or you are able to produce at a lower cost. Right? And low price has never been or ever will be a strategy. That is not a strategy. Low cost is a strategy, right? But not low price. Some cost leaders use price as a lever to grow their share, but it's not the advantage in and of itself, right? When you're reducing the price, you're doing a favor to who? Your shareholders? No, right? It's to customers. When you structure your operations to have a distinctly lower cost position than your competitors by being really clever, like Southwest Airlines, right? Or Vanguard, or Mars and Company, then you're doing your shareholders a favor. And you have a little tool in your toolbox, which is that, whenever we feel like it, we can just cut prices in the short term, right, to grab some share. Then when we have the share, we'll maybe even drive our costs down further, and our shareholders will be really happy. But just don't fool yourself on this, and do yourself the favor of hanging in there, going back to where to play, going back to your aspiration to find a way to win. Because everybody in this room deserves to live a business life winning. It's just worth doing. I don't know how to say it any clearer, right? It's not worth spending a life in a business not winning. It is better to exit said business and do something else than to not be winning. And my conception of winning, right, is not totalitarian. One company wins and nobody else does. In an industry, in a sector, there can be many companies that win. By doing what? Spreading out, having a where to play that enables them to, with their customers, the ones they've chosen to play with, they can be absolutely the best. So don't sell yourself short. And it is much better to be like Tennis Canada and say it'll take 9 years for this to manifest itself. We knew that at the time. We knew that it would have to be 12 to 14-year-olds, right, that 9 years later would be pros, because the pros that we then had, it was too late. It was absolutely too late to turn them into great stars. We've got a really nice young man named Peter Polanski, who's 25 now, and is probably as talented. He's probably physically as talented, and he's got as good a brain as Vasek Pospisil, our 28th or 9th ranked singles player in the world. But we didn't do for him what he needed to have done for him when he was 12. And so he's doomed to be 150, and probably he'll get as high as maybe 110 or so, somewhere in the 110 to 150 range. And I feel badly, like I don't feel so badly that I couldn't have done anything about it, because I wasn't there until 9.5 years ago when we embarked on this strategy. But we didn't give him a chance to fulfill his promise. So don't do that to yourself. That's the thing. You have in your power. You're the partners of this wonderful firm, and I think you are striving for greatness. But keep on pushing in every business. Deloitte will be obviously the number one firm in your sector in Australia if every piece of Deloitte strives to win. If there are chunks of Deloitte that don't strive to win, what'll happen? Somebody else will, right? Inevitably, somebody does, and then you have to live with them having an advantage over you. Capabilities. The key point on capabilities is that over time, as I've watched this happen, and I did a whole bunch of work on this with my friend Mike Porter 15 or, man, time flies, 20 years ago. And it's just ever more clear to me as I go along that the having one killer capability is not the route to happiness. And so I would just say, think about a network of capabilities that together give you advantage. And I think, personally, the tech industry there's no better example than using the tech industry to illustrate what is the problem with having one capability upon which your entire strategy is premised, right? You create one technological breakthrough and bring that to market. What inevitably happens? Again, why in tech are the cycles of advantage so short? Because most of the tech companies come to market with one thing. They've broken through with this piece of software, with this piece of hardware, this new way of doing something. It's one thing. And if it's super successful, which in tech you can get super successful really fast, what does everybody do? What does every geek in a garage do? Right? Take aim at that one thing and say, I can do a better version of that one thing. Right? The companies that have sustainability in their advantage have a bunch of capabilities that give them an advantage. Like, you just think about the tech firms that have sustained some advantage. Like, I'm no big fan of Microsoft, partially because I think they've tried to maintain too broad a where to play for too long, and it's going to hurt them. But I'll give them this credit, right? I think they've built a number of capabilities that are hard to replicate, right? So their corporate sales force and their corporate selling capability is daunting. If you want to sell in against Microsoft into the corporate channel, it's not just product challenge. They've also done a good job of creating an ecosystem around their product set. So it's not just Windows, because guess what? If it was Windows, would they still be the dominant player? Who wakes up in the morning and says, "Thank heavens for my Windows"? Anybody here? No. In fact, this is the tricky where to play, right? If you try to dominate that, you want every single computer screen to have Windows on it, and that is your where to play. What happens? You keep releasing one Windows release after another Windows release, and they land all with what noise? A big thud, right? When's the last Windows release that the market was universally enthused about? What do you think? That's what I think. Some people argue XP. I don't really buy it. I think XP made corporate users pretty happy. But the last thing where the entire market said, this is awesome, was Windows 95. Now, do you think Microsoft has the reason that's the case is because they've been investing less and less in every Windows release? Do you think so? No, they've been investing more and more. They invested an enormous amount to come up with Vista, which the world said in response, seriously? Right? Isn't that what you said? I mean, that's what I said. Seriously? You want me to spend 2 hours de-installing the other thing to install this? It's useless, and it's not even worth 2 hours of my time. In fact, I can't kind of tell that there's anything new about this. 7, 8, right? So that's an example. And so, what's the response to that? Right? That attempt to continue to dominate. The world changed that where to play on them. So that where to play was, we want to play in 100% of the screens that you use to operate your life. What percent of the screens that people use to operate their life, if you time weight them, do you think Windows now has? It's a tiny number now, right? What screen do you pay attention to all day long? Your tablet for some, your smartphone for others, and you still a little bit of Microsoft. So I'd argue that by trying to maintain the broadest where to play possible, because you needed to defend all of that revenue, you've created a situation where people have chosen to utilize a different form of screen, in part so they don't have to use your damn operating system, but in part because other people have figured out how to do that better. That notwithstanding, I think Microsoft has hung in there and is still a massively profitable company and done well, in part because they didn't depend on one capability. So think about a network of capabilities that will make you better. And I probably talk too much about Procter & Gamble in this front, but I mean, Procter & Gamble is a good example where it is very hard to make an argument that Procter & Gamble is decidedly the best in the world at anything. I mean, it's my beloved company that I've worked for 29 years, but it's true. Like, it's super hard to say, even though we're absolutely awesome at consumer understanding. You simply cannot make an argument that we understand female beauty consumers better than L'Oreal. L'Oreal is just awesome. Awesome at that. And you can't say we're better at innovation than Johnson & Johnson. You can't say that we have stronger scale than Unilever, because the data is they're the same size as we are. Right? That having been said, if you put together innovation, brand building, consumer understanding, scale, and go-to-market capability, I would argue there's no other company with which we compete that can match us across all of those five. And that is the source of the advantage. And it's really daunting. What do you do if you're L'Oreal and you're 15 billion and we're 90 billion? Like, how do you make that scale disadvantage go away? How do you have the same strength with Target or Walmart or Carrefour, et cetera, that we have? You can't. We're just way more important to those people than L'Oreal is. They love L'Oreal. They say, you're a great beauty company, but these other big companies, Procter & Gamble, you matter a lot more. It's daunting if you're L'Oreal and you invest 1/10 of what we invest in innovation. How do you make that go up 10 times? Anyway, I don't want to overplay the point, but it's about a network of things, and this is one of the reasons why I think really rolling around the where to play, how to win question a lot is important, because at first blush, I think it's often, well, they have that one thing and we can't beat them. Don't try to beat them on that one thing, whatever that one thing is. Figure out, if we did a network of things that we're all reinforcing, how could that produce a better answer for us that will beat the one thing? And we'll let them be better than us at that one thing. That's fine, because we do all of these other things better. Right? I mean, it's like Microsoft. Is their operating system better? No, right? Definitively no. Does that stop them from having competitive advantage in the PC operating system market? Hell no. Right? They make an absolute ton of money without the best product in that product market. So the question is there a contradiction in what you're saying, Roger? You want to have a winning aspiration, but you're saying you don't have to win in all your capabilities, right? So I would argue it's not a contradiction. If I said you don't have to win in all the places you've chosen to play, you're not going to win in this segment of the market, and this segment of the market, and this segment. It would be a contradiction. But what I'm talking about are capabilities at this point, right? So I think you have to win with the customer, with whatever product or service you're offering in whatever where that is. But the way that you can win has to do with a network of capabilities, not each of which will be better than everybody. Right? Now that is, I would say it's not without trickiness in the corporate culture in question. So if you're a capability that is where you're not striving to be the best in that capability in the world, because you have these other capabilities, that's harder to have. I believe this is one of the reasons why corporations should disaggregate more and more and more than they have. And this is why, like, I've been very much part of Procter & Gamble outsourcing, a huge part of its employee services IT thing, in part because those employees didn't feel that they were as important and central to Advantage as the people in marketing and advertising. So I think it's a challenge. I don't think it's so much a contradiction as much as it's a challenge, and I think the answer is figure out how to partner with our other organizations and get what you need to combine with the other capabilities that you have. And I've been a proponent at Procter & Gamble of just doing more and more and more of that. I mean, this is one of the things, this is just a slight digression. I think the whole sort of way of thinking about what you do and do not outsource is not as sophisticated as it could be and should be, right? There's lots of companies that say, oh no, that's really central and important to us, so we could never outsource that. I think you have to have much finer gradation. So my two examples would be, okay, one of the finest brand building companies on the face of the planet is Procter & Gamble. One of the biggest tools for building brands is advertising. And so you'd say what's absolutely central and core to Procter & Gamble is their advertising. Who does Procter & Gamble ads? Procter & Gamble? No, they outsource that. It's ad agencies do that. So you can say, how can that be? It's core to your competitive advantage. How can it be? What you have is the entire infrastructure around defining what the ad has got to accomplish, managing the production of it, doing the testing of it and everything. That's all Procter & Gamble people, but they realize that they need these whacked out creative people in the agencies to come up with a neat way of doing that. Same with Herman Miller, one of the world's finest office furniture companies, one of the two or three, depending on Steelcase, Herman Miller, Hayworth, finest companies. They are known more than the others for their design. They have more of their objects in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art than any other industrial organization, right? And so you'd say, so design is their absolute core competence. Then you ask the question, okay, who designs furniture at Herman Miller? Not Herman Miller people. Everything at Herman Miller is designed by outside designers. And one of the reason for it is a theory that's always been at Herman Miller, which I love the thesis. They believe that the best furniture designers in the world are not furniture designers. They're industrial designers who design lots of things, right? So the greatest furniture designer in the history of the world, arguably, is Charles Ames. He wasn't a furniture designer. It's just one of the many things he designed. Same with the guys who designed the Aeron chair for Herman Miller, Stumpf and Chadwick. And so their theory is, if we created our own furniture design department, we would have less good designs, and what they specialize is in managing the furniture design process. So I think companies have to be much more precise about saying what they do and what they don't do. And I look forward to, over the course of the rest of my life, is seeing ever more disaggregation of companies. And one of the things that I was proud of at Procter & Gamble, because I was very much part of the outsourcing of 7,500 people to IBM, HP, and Jones Lang LaSalle. And we cared so much about those employees. We arranged with the companies who wanted all of our employees. They wanted 100% of our employees because they liked the quality of them, to be able to survey them on an ongoing basis. And their happiness, even though we were accused of selling loyal P&Gers into slavery, the employee satisfaction went up dramatically, statistically significantly up, 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years out. And the salary trajectory was statistically significantly better than the salary trajectory while they were there. And that's because they were in an organization that specialized in what they were doing, and they were more valuable members of that, and it worked out well. Anyway, so capabilities, think multiple. And if you can't think of how to win and capabilities that would win first, chances are this is the opposite of the advice I'm giving you on where to play. You're probably thinking too narrowly there. You're thinking too broadly on where to play, and too narrowly on there is my guesstimate. Okay. The final thing is management systems, and this sounds like the least strategic part of the strategy choices. I don't think it is. I think it's absolutely critical. And what is important here are having management systems that ensure that you're building and maintaining the key capabilities that you need to win. Right? That's when I say management systems in this way, that's what it is. Right? And so this took a long time. At Procter & Gamble, it took a long time. We had these 5 things that we thought, these are the things that are core to our competitive advantage. And we did not have management systems that ensured that we were building those and maintaining them on an ongoing basis. Right? We didn't, for example, know what scale did for us until I convinced their now CEO, John Mueller, who was sort of a second in command in the finance function, to actually do this 2-year-long study that figured out what scale mattered and what scale did and did not do for you, that changed our entire country entry approach. We had a country entry approach that said the way you enter a new country, or you're not operating, is you enter with a couple of key categories, and you work to make those key categories 2 or 3 categories. So you go in with bar soaps and baby diapers and whatever, and you work and work and work until you make those 2 categories profitable, and then you add categories to it. And this was an awesome theory, other than it didn't work and was incredibly painful. And we found out only when we studied this in detail that you cannot make money as Procter & Gamble on 2 categories in a country. Unless you have a requisite scope of categories, you'll just lose money and lose money and lose money and lose money and get depressed, which we did 3 times in the southern cone of South America, each time wasting between $200 and $500 million before retreating with a bloodied nose. Turns out you need about 5 categories, depending on the categories. You've got to go in with that scope, or don't go in at all. Well, we didn't have a management system that understood how scale worked and how you could leverage scale until we built that management system. And we have systems to measure and monitor each of those 5 things and make sure that we're building the capabilities that are necessary. So if you don't have that, I don't think you've closed the loop entirely on it. So even though it doesn't sound terribly strategic, it is strategic, because you've got to be so serious about those capabilities. Now I'm going to stop for a minute and just ask if there's any questions on what I've talked about, and then go on to a little bit on the latest thing I've done, which is a test. How to give yourself a quiz on whether you've got a strategy that is going to do something for you. But before I go on with that, maybe just any questions or thoughts? Shoot.
You talked about alliancing, partnering, sort of deconstructing. Just any thoughts and observations that you've got on what you're seeing in the professional services area around where that's working and not working?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's a good question that I don't have an awesome answer to. So I don't look and study that well enough to say what's worked out great over time. I'll give you my historical bias, which is that in professional service firms, I've almost always seen alliances purported to be between firms, but they're actually not. They're between individuals. So what tends to happen is some partner in some professional service firm and some partner in some other professional service firm end up liking each other, saying, I want to work together, and they create an alliance between the two firms, and then everybody in each of the firms, typically the small firm, says, wow, this is awesome. We have this alliance with this big firm. We'll sell a whole lot of product through this big firm, and it doesn't happen. And the reason is that in professional service firms still, the sales force are the senior professionals, and they act more like small business men and women than they act like members of a large organization. And so the fact that two partners from two firms like each other and think that there's a great benefit to the firms working together, it is very hard to get the firms to actually take that. And typically you can't mandate it, and you can't sort of wholesale it. Like what you'd like to do is wholesale it and just sort of say, okay, all of you people now, you start using that capability from this allied firm. Doesn't work that way. It works more in the way of diffusion theory, which is there are early adopters, and you got to get those and have that work out really well, and then then you get at some point it hits a tipping point and it ramps up, and you've got some laggards who ain't going to use this alliance capability until hell freezes over, and so managing an alliance and getting the value out of the alliance is a function of understanding diffusion theory and creating a path that makes diffusion happen. That doesn't mean I don't think it can work, but it's not. Alliances tend not to be the rapid success that they're often imagined to be in advance in professional service firms. Does that answer your question, or were you thinking about something else?
No, I guess I'm just looking for capability alignments that's unique to professional services, unique to us in an advisory capacity a la Deloitte. So I'm just curious more around that as compared to FMCG.
So I'm still not quite sure what I could say that would be useful in answering your question. Are you sort of asking what particular skills, what particular capabilities should you allot?
Capabilities. Where
Yeah.
would you see some of the capabilities that might make sense to align?
I guess, are you saying for Deloitte? Given what I know about Deloitte, what capabilities would Deloitte need it?
Yes,
Yeah. Boy, I guess I think it's mainly stuff that you've been folding in and acquiring. So all things digital, all things data, all things design. I think building those capabilities. I don't think through alliances, but more by buying and bringing inside the firm those things. I guess I just think there's this broad category of processes that actually make collaboration happen. Is an area that I think professional service firms need to get still better at than they currently are. I think there's this challenge of professional services in general are built around a capability set associated with the profession. Engineering consulting firms, they have a bunch of engineers that want to be engineers. Lawyers want to be lawyers. Auditors want to be auditors, et cetera. Strategists want to be strategists. And nothing happens in organizations without some form of collaboration that causes the people in the organization, not the professional service firm, the organization in question, to actually do stuff differently. And I find professional service firms across the board impoverished in terms of their capabilities to actually get stuff to happen. And the theories and toolboxes around that are less good than the toolboxes around what is the right answer. So I would say that's a vector that I think professional service firms in general would be wise to do. And I mean, having embedded into your product a way of making stuff happen is so key. So what's everybody can pretty quickly say what's the most famous design firm on the planet? What do you think? IDEO, right? It's just head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of its brand awareness. And I think it's there not because they're awesome designers, they are, but I just don't think they're all that better as designers than Frog or Continuum or Zeba or whatever. There's a whole bunch of designers that are just, or Pentagram, that are just awesome. But IDEO's core product is a product that inadvertently facilitates clients adopting their designs. And I know it inadvertently does because I actually quizzed David Kelly on stage on this point. I wrote a blog about it, and you can see the little tape from it. Because I was curious. David's a dear friend of mine, and I was saying, his great contribution to the world of design, in my view, is not his stuff about deep user understanding, because lots of other people had that too. It's the rapid prototyping. And if you think about the challenge that most designers feel, is they have great designs that the client says, I don't know, you make me nervous here, I'm not sure I want to do this, can you prove that this will work? And it doesn't happen, right? That's the number one complaint of designers, is doing stuff that never happens. So David Kelly comes up with this notion that in order to get better designs, you do this rapid prototyping. So go with a low res kind of version of your thing right to the users right away, and say, what about something that looks kind of like this? And they say, no, not really, but that's sort of. Then you go back another 2 weeks later, and 2 weeks later you don't wait and hope that what you've got is right. And the theory is that makes for a product or service or user experience, whatever. Let's just say a product that by the time you launch it is so perfectly suited to the customer's needs, right? Now it has this other benefit, right? Which is if you're IDEO, right? There's a third party in this conversation, right? There's IDEO people, there's you, the user. Do you like this? Make it a little bit different. There's the client. And the client is watching this and starting with a low-res prototype where the customer says, well, sort of, not really, to 10 iterations later, you saying, if you put this on the market, man, I would go nuts. This is so awesome. Who's watching? The client, right? And so it's a process that now, the question is inadvertent. It's a process that, along with making it better for the customer, builds the confidence of the client to go ahead and do it. And so I asked him on stage, David, is that what you had in mind when you created this process, or was it just making it more likely that you would like it? And it was interesting. He said, no, I actually never thought of that, but I'm going to steal it. That's a good idea, Roger. I'm going to steal that. So I've just found it interesting that I think this is inadvertent success, and that IDEO is dramatically more successful than many of their competitors because they've built into their process a way of making it easier for the client to adopt what they have to say. So my challenge for Deloitte, right, would be, are there ways that you can deliver your product that in the process of actually doing the technical work, right, in the very process of doing the technical work, stuff you'd have to do anyway. So David Kelly would say, I got to do that rapid prototyping in the process of creating a great design for you, Guillaume. Right? You inadvertently, or well, you also have the effect of making the client's use of the product that you've designed for them, right? Whether it's a strategy or it's a redo of some process, whatever. You make it easier for them to adopt. That would be the ultimate professional service firm killer app. I don't know what it is in each of your businesses. It would probably be different for each of your businesses, but I would encourage you to just think about that IDEO example and think about how could I pull that off in the technical professional service that I am currently doing for clients. Yep.
I think there's, as I think Avi was referring to, there's some kind of, I'd say, healthy conflict between the way we manifest, a way we consider where we will play, as you know, we let's not go shotgun, and what capabilities happen. I mean, one of the things that we try and do, which I strongly support, is have a diverse range of talents internally, and then we go out with a single focus. But I do think there is, and I think it's creative conflict between balancing those two tensions. But what I'm kind of particularly interested in is that getting some some more depth on is a thing you said around the nature of embedding what we do, not in say these into the partners, but into the organisation. Mm-hmm. So, and because that in itself is quite a complex issue, and I'm interested in your perspective on that within the framework of generational change. Because one of the things I'm seeing that I'm really excited about is with the Gen Ys coming through, where there's more a sense. Well, they're better educated and so on and so forth, and they have a greater sense of autonomy and a desire for individual empowerment than I think, and possibly less need to identify with a larger organisation. I think this is an exciting wave for guys like us to capture, but I'd really like to see what your reflections on that are.
Sure, I tend to agree. Actually, I think it's an exciting time. They are different; they're not the same, and that creates kind of tricky aspects. But I think net it's a good thing. And I guess I mean you're a good straight man for the one other slide I had, which is to say I think that the way to think about getting the most out of that next generation, in some sense, by making their job as exciting as it can be, is to think of this as the way strategy and choice happens in an organization. Like the general theory of this is somebody does this strategy, formulates this strategy, and then the organization goes and executes, right? Right? That would be the standard way to think. And so those kiddies who are all excited about things and care deeply about meaning and have a less of attachment to the organization and are more free agents get told, all of us guys who kind of have wrinkles have decided what the strategy is, and now you guys got to go and execute. How do you think that's going to play out? Right? Not well. I think if instead we say, you know what, us guys with wrinkles, guys and gals with wrinkles, have a job, and that's to make a set of choices at the top of the organization about the stuff that we're responsible for. But you're not executing those things. You are now in a position to make the next level of choices, and they're choices. They're not executing, right? Like there is no such thing as execution. Unless you think people are Charlie Chaplin and they turn a bolt a quarter turn. I don't think anybody in this building does that. Everybody is making choices under uncertainty and competition. Now those choices have to be nested. There are some people who make more important and more broad choices than others because they have more experience to do it and more skills and capabilities. But I think saying, instead of, I've made the choice, you execute, I think you have to say to those kiddies, here are the choices I've made. Here's why I've made the choices. Those beget the need for you to make a set of choices. Please go make those choices. If you need some help making them, come back, and I'll be happy to help you provide guidance. And if in the course of making those choices, you can't figure out how to make a set of choices that's consistent with my set of choices, that means this won't work, and you got to come back and tell me that so that I can adjust my choices based on what you've learned. If you do that, I think Gen X and Gen Y will feel like they're not in a gigantic company. They'll feel like they're in a true partnership, and they have a really important role. And I think it's more critical than it's ever been to be realistic about what people do and need to do in organizations.
One way I would reflect back what you've just said, which I strongly agree with, is we need to strongly look at distinguishing between leadership and management, and our role as Wrigley is to provide that leadership and give and to sort of leave the space to enable them to make both right and wrong choices. And like I say, I think David Petraeus has written quite well about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think effectiveness as a person in management has to do with slicing the role you play as thinly as you possibly can to leave room for the people below. It's not to abdicate that. Like, the senior people have to make the senior choices. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, they should go leave. Right? If they're not willing to make the senior choices or not capable of making the senior choices, get the hell out of the way completely. But the best thing to do is to slice them thinly. And I think to an ever greater extent, I think it's always been this way, but I would say to a greater extent than ever in the modern organization, in the modern business world, the highest, most valuable managerial skill, as opposed to professional skill, the highest managerial skill is that of structuring choices. Right? It's not necessarily making choices. That's really important, but structuring the choices in an organization in a way that creates real meaning for people in their lives. You know, and I hesitate to talk about myself and what I do, but at the Rotman School, like, I was considered a really successful dean, thankfully. And I would say the absolute key to the success was figuring out how to make as few choices as possible myself and have all sorts of other people make more choices than they were ever used to. What that enabled me to do is make choices about many more things. Like, I think of my life, my managerial life, is I have many pyramids. Right? I have a pyramid that's running the MBA program. I have a pyramid that's running the undergraduate commerce program, of the PhD program, of promoting the school, of doing outside consulting, of writing books, etc. Like, they're just all these pyramids. And if I take a thick slice, i.e. I make a whole bunch of choices myself, how many pyramids can I do? Hardly any. If I slice them really thin and get other people making most of the choices, I can do a lot. And so lots of people, looked at what I did at the Rotman School and said, how can you run a school and actually teach? Deans aren't supposed to teach. You teach a whole bunch of courses, you write a whole bunch of stuff, you serve on all sorts of government task forces and all that stuff. Do you never sleep? I said, no, I love sleeping. Like, sleeping is one of my favorite things to do. I sleep a lot. But I just don't make many of the choices. What I do is structure them. I tell people, I'm going to make these choices, and you need to make these choices. These are harder, more important choices than you've ever made. I will help you out. I will train you how to make those choices, but it's you. You are making those choices. They love it, right? They absolutely love it. They're deliriously happy. Plus, when you get them to do that, you can pay them way more. My CAO, There's a wonderful woman named Mary Ellen Yeomans, right? She makes twice as much money as she made when I started with her. She walks around the university, her chest all puffed up, being very proud that she makes choices that no other CAO, CFO in the entire university comes even close to. And they say to her, how do you get to make those choices? The dean makes all those choices in my shop. And she said, well, here's, and she's, crazy proud of it. She works like a dog, but happy as a clam because she's crazy proud of making choices. So I think that to me that's the secret. It's the secret of keeping great resources inside. Great resources want to make hard choices. Yeah. So you and I are in violent agreement, I think.
Roger, back to your point about professional services and partnerships and turning individual partner advantage to competitive advantage of a practice. I guess the bottom two layers of that, and what you were talking about before, individual to group, cascade. You said in a pre-competitive stage of a practice, the advantage resides inside the individual partner capability. Whereas when the practice starts winning, it's because the practice plays to win as a practice. So how does that actually happen in practice? What has to happen? And is it a combination of strategic and sort of operational management choices as well as cultural or collaborative choices? The decision by partners to play and to throw their lot in with each other as partners?
Yeah, no. I think you've in your question started hinting around at the answer, and the answer it is partially cultural, right? Like, I think the only way you can make that transition, and many professional service firms never make that transition, and the number one reason is narcissism, right? Is that the partners are narcissists. And they want it to be all about them. And I bet you've all seen this with professional service firms, right? That you've interacted with or whatever, that the partner wants to be everything. And they just happen to be with this law firm or this consulting firm or that firm. So part of it is this cultural thing where partners have to say, I want to build something greater than myself, in which I will be a lesser part, but I'll be a lesser part of a thing that is more meritorious and more advantaged. And so I will take some of the stuff that's in my head and try to routinize it in a way that we can take that knowledge, because there are these, if you think about the theory of assets, there are human assets and knowledge assets, right? Human assets are the assets where, if the human asset walks out on the street and gets hit by a bus, is gone, right? And knowledge assets are assets that after the hitting by the bus, the firm still has something there, because you've codified your knowledge, you've codified a heuristic that's in your head, and therefore it can be built and improved on and enhanced and gotten down the learning curve. So like an unbelievably important key is the attitude of the partners during that transitional phase. Do they want that, or are they so narcissistic that they say that would be the worst possible thing because it's no longer all about me, because I'm me and I'm awesome. And I think it's the life or death of firms. And it's one of the reasons why lots of I know more about the strategy consulting sub-segment of the world, and anybody who knows that industry knows there are a bajillion little startups, and hardly any of them are multi-generational, right? I have to say, it's so sad. I dedicated a big chunk of my life to building Monitor, a company, and how many generations did Monitor Company last? Right? One, right? When it went, still the Mark Fuller, even though that had somebody else called managing director, Mark Fuller was still in charge of Monitor Company, along with Joe Fuller and Mark Thomas. And those three plus me were the Global Executive Committee from 1991 onward. I left when 1998, and they still were it. So it's a one-generational firm, and there was, in my view, a surplus of narcissism in said firm, and as a result, somebody else owns it, and somebody else, you guys, have the opportunity to enforce a different regime that will hopefully make the asset, like my hope that some of the assets that are in it will continue, so the assets are multi-generational. But that's a one-generation firm, just like dozens of others. Like McKinsey's managed to be multi-generational, BCG's managed to be multi-generational, Bain has managed to be multi-generational, and that's kind of it.
So let's give Roger the opportunity to just go through the next set of thoughts that he has.
Oh, okay.
And then we will end up with a few last questions, but I don't want us to miss that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for those questions, and I'll go relatively quickly through it. So, what I have thought a lot about recently is, so, like, I'm probably too dour about this, but as I traipse through the world of businesses, which I have for 33 years as a consultant-y type, the thing that's so incredibly striking to me is that only a tiny minority of firms actually do strategy and think about strategy in a useful way. I peg it at something around 15%. So I'd say 85% of firms that I see out there, interact in some way or another with, do not have a useful definition of strategy, and so they don't do strategy. Full stop. They do other things that masquerade as strategy. So I've been trying to figure out, what are the reasons why, and I wrote a January, if you're interested more in it, a January-February HBR article this year on it. And then I recently came up with this little quiz that's now online, and the URL is at the end of this if you want to go online and do the quiz. It's a quiz about whether you can tell whether you actually have a strategy or need more work. So I just thought I'd run through quickly why do firms not do strategy? And I think there are these three broad reasons. One is they do something that's more comfortable, which is doing strategic planning. Because all firms have strategic plans, most of which have virtually nothing to do with strategy. And you say, well, how could that be, Roger? It's got the same word in the name. But what most strategic plans that I've ever seen are a long list of initiatives. It's a bunch of stuff that the firm is going to do. Now, you could say that is strategy because they're choosing to do some things versus others, but typically that list of initiatives does not have particular coherence or a rationale. It's just a list. And what you'll mainly notice is a list that includes something for everyone. Here's an initiative for manufacturing, here's one for marketing, here's one for sales, here's one for the East Coast, here's from the West Coast, and here's for the downstream, and it's just this exercise in having enough initiatives that you don't have revolt, and that's a substitute for it. And why would people substitute that for strategy? Well, it's just more comfortable. You get to make everybody happy. Here's an initiative for you, and here's one for you, and here's one for you. And when you don't have to lay out the rationale, it's hard after the fact for somebody to say your thinking was completely wrong about that plan. Whereas if you have a strategy, right? If you go back to this and say, these are my 5 choices, here's the reasons for them, here we're going to go do it, and it doesn't work out so hot, then everybody can go back to this and say that strategy was wrong. And so instead, you create a strategic plan and then blame chance, random events, unforeseen things that could have not possibly ever been foreseen as derailing what was otherwise a fantastic plan, and you can show how you did all the initiatives you said you were going to do, and so it's somebody else's fault. Way more comfortable than actually doing a strategy. The second sort of trap that I think detracts from strategy or causes it to not happen at all is what I call cost-based thinking. And on this front, I mean, I guess I sort of ask the question, right? Who is the customer for your costs? For a firm's costs, who's the customer? You are, right? Deloitte is the customer for Deloitte's costs. Deloitte decides how many people to buy, how many square feet to buy, how many pencils to buy, how many IT systems to buy. You're the customer for your costs. How easy, therefore, is it to plan and manage your costs? Fairly straightforward, right? Because it's your choice, right? You can change on a dime on them. Now, some of the costs take a while to get rid of, but you can manage and plan them. Who is the customer for your revenues? For you guys. It's your clients, right? They choose whether to confer revenues on you or not. Right? How easy is it to plan for revenues? In fact, can you plan for revenues? Is planning for revenues actually useful? We do a lot of it. But seriously, do you think it's useful? I actually don't think so. And when I was running Monitor for the 7 years or so I was sort of running or co-running Monitor, I stopped planning for revenues. Because it just made you feel good. It's comfortable. Made you feel good to have numbers and lists of them, and then you manage to them. But what you realize is that one, you can't plan for them because somebody else decides whether they're going to give you revenues or not. And actually, the method for managing them, trying to get them to be different than they would otherwise be in the middle of a year, because that's what it's supposed to be about. Well, we need to have revenues planned so that we can manage to our budget, right? So there's two situations, right? So situation A is the revenues for whatever reason come in at what you planned or higher, right? And if that's the situation, managing them is useless and redundant, right? Okay? Fair enough? Or revenues are coming in lower than you planned them. Then what do? Now that you know that, because you had a plan and they're coming in lower, what do? What are the couple things that you tend to do? Cut costs, but of course that has nothing to do with revenue. It doesn't change revenues whatsoever. Yep. So again, revenue planning was completely useless. What else do you do? Focus on sales. So even though previously you were already focusing on sales, you focus more on sales. What does focusing on more on sales, how does that happen in a professional service firm like yours? You need more sales than you're getting from your current strategy, and in the middle of the year you want to get more sales by focusing on sales. What do you tend to do? For what it's worth, my observation from having run a professional service firm for many years is you have your partners engage in incredibly destructive activities with clients, right? Right? Going to them with desperation written all over their face, clawing at their sleeve, begging, please give me some work. And how does that work? Generally. Really badly. Or the other, what's the absolute favorite? You guys haven't gotten the favorite method of boosting sales in the middle of the year. Cut prices. Right? Cut prices to stimulate volume. And how does that tend to work out? Worse. Yeah, it just sort of makes the situation that was bad quite a bit worse, right? It convinces the clients that they should have never been paying the full price for it in the first place, and then you have to live with that for maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 years. So these are the benefits of planning and managing revenues. It helps you more quickly engage in self-destructive activities that damage the firm. So, anyway. So doing that and thinking about and not recognizing that. So when you think about an income statement, do the revenues look any different than the costs? Right, they're kind of all formulated the same. It's as if it's the same exercise. We figure out what the revenues are and we figure out what the costs are. Are there bigger error terms around the revenues than the costs? Do we say this in the annual in the budget that goes to the board? Well, revenue, that's of course plus or minus 10% because you can't plan that. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? Costs we take care of. So the error term is there 1 to 2%. Do we tell that to anybody? No, because we have this cost-based thinking, and everything's like costs, and everything's the same, and so we should plan them out, and we can plan things. What is the only thing that makes revenue show up? Strategy. Yeah, strategy, right? It's having a where to play and how to win that is what? Compelling to the people in the where. That having been said, because that's scary, we avert our eyes to that and plan costs exactly the same way we plan revenues exactly the same way we plan costs, even though it's a futile and useless exercise. But it prevents us, it helps, it's a sop that helps us from thinking we have to do strategy because we're busily putting together the plan. Just think about how much time you spend on revenue planning. Just think about it. Like seriously. You should just do an experiment. Just don't do it some year and keep track of how many extra days you get to do, shall we say, useful things instead. It'd be a revelation. The last way that people avoid actually doing strategy is to use self-referential frameworks that make them feel way more comfortable. And there are two particular self-referential frameworks that are in widespread use in the world. And I think the only reason that you could possibly adduce to explain the reason why these are so popular is how comfortable they are. So one is emergent strategy. Now, emergent strategy was created by the finest Canadian business academic of all time, a guy named Henry Mintzberg. He wrote an article about this in 1978. And it was a very intelligent article. He was sort of this realist guy. He would go out and say, I know that corporate systems say you're doing this. What are you really doing? And what he said is, if you look, most strategies are not actually, don't actually work out exactly the way people thought. They actually, things work out differently than was thought. And in fact, the path that the firm goes along is emergent. Once they see that things are different than what they expected in the strategy, they have to modify their strategy on an ongoing basis. Totally sensible, a great insight. You know, he wrote an award-winning, one of the most famous business academic articles of all time about it. However, it's been picked up and mangled in its usage. It's not what Henry ever meant. So what people now say is, like Henry Mintzberg said, you can't predict the future exactly. It's really uncertain. And so instead of choosing, we are going to wait and see what unfolds and then make choices. And that's because we're following emergent strategy. Now, this is so comfort-making, right? You don't have to make any choices at all, and you just kind of wait until things become clear, and then you make your choices. What's the tiny little fly in the ointment there? If things are not clear now, because the world is a confusing place, when in the future is it suddenly going to become clear because the world no longer is stochastic and unpredictable and the like? When? When do you think? A year from now? 2 years from now? 10 years from now? How about never? It's like this New Yorker cartoon. Tuesday doesn't work? How about never? Does never work for you? You ever seen that? That's the most famous New Yorker cartoon of all time. So it's just a illogical thing. The notion that the world somehow is going to get clear so that you can then make choices is completely far-fetched. It never does become clearer, and you just use it as an excuse never to make any choices. The other self-referential framework is the now incredibly popular resource-based view of the firm, which says that your advantage is based on your capabilities, and you should think about building capabilities. All this stuff about where to play and how to win, no, that's not it. Just build capabilities. And what people have now said is have totally glommed onto that, because what you can do, right, is console yourself by saying, I'm going to build some capabilities. Who the hell knows what they're going to be used for, but I'm going to build capabilities, and I will be able to show everybody I have capabilities now that I didn't have, and if it doesn't work out well for me, that's not my fault. It's because the world just evolved in a different way. But I can feel totally comfortable having built a bunch of capabilities. So I think there are those three ways that people have managed to convince themselves to stay away from actually making strategy choices. They're little stories they tell themselves. I need a plan. Like, think of how many times you've heard this. Right? We need to do a strategic plan. No, you don't. You need to do a strategy. But you hear a strategic plan, and then they do that strategic plan, acting as if revenues look exactly like costs, and basic it all on a theory of how you manage and forecast costs, and then use these self-referential frameworks to say, well, we just do a plan. We don't have to do a strategy because it's emergent, and we'll do that sometime in the future, and we'll basically build capabilities. And I'll just show you. I've now done a little test that's online that asks 9 questions, 3 about strategic planning. Is it difficult to identify explicit choices that show what your company will not do? And if your answer is yes, here's the problem, here's the remedy. So there's just 9 of them, and then at the end of the quiz, I say if you have 7 to 9 yes answers, you got a big problem. If you got 4 to 6 yes answers, you're making progress. 1 to 3, you're doing pretty well. And if you've got 0 yes answers, congratulations, probably. Although I'm deeply suspicious that they're delusional if they've got that sort of little tweak there. And the URL is there. And Harad's got this presentation which you can send out. But I encourage you to it's fun. It'll take you literally 5 minutes to do the quiz, and you may have fun with it.
We literally have a few minutes left for a short question and a short answer, or perhaps 2. And I know that this last session actually generated new ideas and new emotions. So any questions or comments?
I'm really interested in what you were talking about, not planning for revenue, but I don't necessarily understand the solution. I hear what you're saying about having strategy. And I'm a firm believer that we need to keep people accountable, certainly a firm of 570 or however many partners we are now. And the challenge I have in my mind is, well, how does Guillaume keep everybody accountable if we don't plan for revenue, for example? I envisage we would need a matrix of strategy, very clear strategy throughout the firm to be able to plan resources, for example, and then keep people accountable. And I still feel very nervous about moving away from having that structure of trying to manage everything almost, including revenue, to one that is a bit more fluid, and then I'm uncertain how we keep people accountable to deliver on their promises.
Yeah, it's I think it's an interesting question. As with most things, right, if you're comfortable and satisfied with what you're doing now, you won't change, right? So I don't actually expect, on the basis of what I've said, you to change, because you're not sufficiently uncomfortable with the destructive aspects of what you currently do, right? And so you'll have to get more, more seeing, like, and I'm doing this in part so that you can now watch what happens when you get behind on revenues and ask yourself, we planned this and we're behind. did the things we did, or were they good, bad, or indifferent? And all I'd say is, if instead you had revenue planning is, here's our costs, and so we need more than that at the end of the year, and just left it at that, so that doesn't take long, right? Maybe 5 minutes or so, and then had partners who each had a strategy that they were working behind, and then they just go off and do their thing. I think all the stuff that people believe about how you get accountability has no basis in fact or merit. And so I think I'd encourage you, as step one is to observe what happens when you're behind revenues, and observe the accountability and the impact of that accountability. Then you'll think about different ways of doing it.
I think it's both a question and a comment. So I'm making a comment that revenue planning will stay, and I don't think it's just accountability of partners, but it's capacity planning for a 6,000 people organization. So the real question is, what happens when halfway through the year you don't meet your revenue plan? And if I hear you correctly, you think about you need to refresh your strategy. So if you go back to IDEO, and you talked about the fact that they were successful because they're very able to very quickly prototype strategy. So my question for you, if you think this is a relevant options for us to look at, refresh the strategy, do a very rapid prototyping, and recognizing the revenue may come from different places.
Yeah, no, that's certainly what I would do, right? So what I'd say is that all the things that firms do to boost revenues in the middle of the year to meet their revenue plan are bad. They're 100% terrible for the company. So instead of doing that, I would say, whoops, bad year, and say that year was bad. Why? Because things didn't work out the way our strategy suggested they would, so our strategies aren't good enough. Get to work on your strategy right now. Don't try to manage revenue up and create more problems than you already have. You just have to. I think you just have to suck it up and accept the fact that we blew it. And what does blowing it mean in terms of the need to revisit our strategy? And if you did that, Deloitte year over year would perform better than it currently does.
The question is not about whether you blow it, it's how quickly you can recover so you can keep the lights on.
Okay, so it says it doesn't. It's not whether you blow it or not. It's how quickly can you recover, and that's one of the other things about strategy. The best thing you can do with strategy is you say, here's my 5 answers, the choices, and then ask yourself what would have to be true. What would have to be true about the customers, our partner, our alliance partners, our suppliers, the government, whatever, for this to work out the way we want it to, and believe it will. And then you watch those things carefully so that you get the early warning, because the minute those things turn out to not be true, clients aren't acting the way we thought they would, then you can start to modify your strategy. What typically happens is, instead of doing that, we don't have that list, we don't watch it, we watch the revenues not show up the way we hoped they did, then engage in a monumental number of completely destructive activities, and then at the end of the year say, maybe we should start thinking about our strategy. That's waiting far too long to do it, and only after creating death and destruction along the way.
3 final observations, and then as a brief thank you. Firstly, it was good strategy to bring Roger out after revenue planning was done. Secondly, if we look at the time we have spent and are spending on budgets and forecasts and the likes, and we spend just the same amount of time thinking about our own choices, and that's where this nested choice concept is so important. It's not just the choices that are made at a corporate level or at a cluster level, but at a personal level, and we are all embarking on that now. Our personal plans needs to reflect the strategic consequences of this. And I think what today has done is it has just again showed us how complex it is. You can take any nonsense and package it in the 5-choice cascade, but that's not useful. And we've seen that happen so often. So the big challenge for us is to do that. The third element is, I have done this test It's on the blog, so go and have a look at it. You'll get the link when we distribute it. And I know that we've got a lot of work to do, although I thought I knew what the answers should be. So I tried to manipulate it, but I couldn't. The fact is, we have a lot of more work to do, but that is the beauty of having embarked on this journey and forever being a learning organization. Not just in what we do, but how we do this and how we commit to strategy as a vehicle for that. It is indeed a privilege to have one of the world's leading business thinkers with us in this personal capacity. You would have seen again today that he's not rated as that for no reason. The thinking is progressive, the thinking is challenging, and that is what we would like to share with you. So without further ado, please join me in thanking Roger for sharing another bit of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.